All right, folks, thanks for being here today. We have Ellis Raskin, who's another candidate for City Council with us. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your time. Why don't you start out by just telling folks who you are and why you're running for council?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. First of all, thanks so much for having me here.
Sure.
Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to the listeners and viewers at home. So, as part of my day job, I'm an environmental attorney. And what that means in practical terms is that I help stakeholders and communities across California build communities that are prepared for 21st century challenges. That involves things like making sure that we have enough housing, making sure that cities are prepared to have infrastructure that's ready for 21st century challenges, and making sure that organizations and governments are run effectively to move us forward towards the future. Here in Santa Monica, obviously, we've got a lot of challenges in the years ahead. Obviously, public safety is a focus for many people. Affordability is a key issue. Making sure that folks who are growing up here and graduating from high school have an opportunity to live here without having to pay an arm and a leg and another arm and another leg to afford an apartment or a home is obviously something else. The environment, homelessness, and all those things interconnected are really, I think, key issues. With respect to the homelessness and public safety part of the conversation, I mean, obviously that's something that I think has been at the forefront of voters' minds.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I think we'll probably be talking a little bit more about this, but the thing that I would ask folks at home is do you feel safer than you did 3.5, 4 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Are you in a better place? And so I'm running because I've got the skills and experience working with public agencies and as an attorney to effectuate effective change. As far as I'm aware, except for Dan Hall, who fought on the front lines in Iraq, I think I'm the only candidate who's worked for a law enforcement agency in the past. I worked for the San Francisco Sheriff's Department, where I developed use of force policies. I understand how to effectively work with stakeholders across the political spectrum, and I think we've got a good chance to win this November, and look forward to working with folks to build a better.
Sure. I mean, we can just jump right in on
Sure, yeah.
safety and homelessness, right? So, I guess which one? Pick one where you want to start. And what are you going to do about it? Safety or homelessness?
Well, let's talk about safety.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what's your plan?
Well, I think what has to be said first and foremost is obviously we all, I think, want to get back to staffing levels that make sense for the city. I don't think we're going to get there unless we fix our city's budget.
Staffing levels for the police department or staffing levels writ large?
Well, both.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think we need I think to listen to the folks in the police departments and take seriously what they're saying. We need, obviously, I think, folks across the board of the city. We need more code enforcement people. We need to make sure that our libraries are staffed up.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure that there are folks who are picking up trash in the streets. We're not going to be able to achieve any of those goals unless we address the key financial challenges that are affecting our city. Right now, we're being bled dry by litigation settlements. I've said it before. I'm going to stand tall and stand up strong against litigation settlements that I think don't make sense for our city.
So, folks, let me explain this. So, you're talking like slip and fall cases, like that kind of litigation?
Well, I mean, there's a specific series of litigation that's been happening related to the Eric Euler settlements.
Sure. So, but again, when it comes to that, like you can't do it. You're not going to be able to do anything about that, right? Like those settlements are done. The money's sort of assigned to those settlements. Like you're not going to be able to claw that back. So
you're right, but there are a lot more cases that are coming in the door. There are still folks who are showing up and asking for money,
mm-hmm.
And I think we're at the point now where we have to take a stand and say, all right, well, I think enough is enough. I think we've I think done a good job as a city by settling the cases that have come in. And obviously, it's been a terrible tragedy for everyone involved, and I think that the city has made a good faith effort to make it right for
mm-hmm.
the folks who are harmed here. But we also, as public leaders, have to be stewards of public funds and stewards of public money, and you have to make difficult decisions about how you're allocating resources towards supporting a broad range of priorities, including public safety, and balance that against litigation settlements.
So we'll come back to this, but I think this we've jumped right into the deep end here. So for folks who don't know, maybe whatever the Euler case, there was a horrific case of child abuse by a City of Santa Monica employee for decades while he was a volunteer at the Police Activities League, which is a nonprofit associated with the police department. Very, very abbreviated version of it. That has created a great deal of individuals and individual settlements that have come forward with sort of several, I don't know what the legal term is. We've had several groups of litigants represented by attorneys who've come forward and we are now in the hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements paid out. We've never gone. There's never been a trial. The city's never gone to trial. Euler killed himself shortly after being arrested, and so again, never gone to trial. Entirely, this has been litigated on the civil side of things. This notion that maybe we need to do something to pare back on that. What does that mean? So were we talking less generous settlements with future litigants? Are we saying no more settlements? Are we changing the burden of proof? So this is it's a very thorny subject, and I'm kind of, to be blunt, I'm a little bit surprised that you we're going down this path. So like, how are you going to deal with that?
Well, we did dive right into the deep end of this one. And let me be clear. Obviously, the budget picture that we're talking about here is far more complex than just a series of settlements.
Right. The Euler case isn't the only reason we have budgetary problems.
Of course.
But it is one of the single largest payouts in sort of budget line items.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So, I'll answer your question directly, but I'll say also that, the context of answering this question, we did get right into the thorny thicket here. And obviously there's a lot more we got to do to support local business. And I'm sure we'll talk about that too soon. But specifically with respect to the settlements, it's simply just an issue, I think, of taking a closer look at the merits of each individual case, and not necessarily supporting a vote right off the bat to say, okay, we'll cut you a settlement check. Take a closer look at it and figure out, with the remaining cases that are coming in, whether it makes sense to balance really scarce public funds that we need to be stewards of against the need to prioritize other things.
And we will certainly move on from this in a little bit, but this is, I think, an interesting subject. So the way these settlements go now, a judge reviews them, right? So what happens is a lawyer rounds up or finds, or however you want, terminology you want to find. They have a number of clients. Those clients go before a judge and they tell the judge their story, and the judge decides what sort of level of payout they should receive. I guess that's my understanding of the way it works now.
Well, you can mediate things before a judge. Generally, a preliminary step often involves a party, plaintiff or somebody else involved, represented by counsel, sending a letter to the city saying, "Here's our case. We propose this settlement," and the city then will do a risk assessment, analyze the facts, and determine whether or not it makes sense to proceed with litigation.
And I guess, so this is my question around the settlement issue, though, is that there's two things. There's the optics, and I'm not putting any moral judgments on any of this. This is just brass tacks. So there's the optics of fighting a lawsuit over child sexual harassment or child sexual abuse. So like the optics of that are real bad, and the city doesn't want to do that, best of my knowledge. They don't want to be the people in court fighting that. And then there's the fiscal side of it, which says, should we disagree with this settlement proposal and go to court, how much are we actually going to end up paying at the end of the day? And so I guess we're narrowing in on this, and before we move on, which is that which part of that are you going to intercede on? Are you talking about taking it to trial and using that as a mechanism to force plaintiff attorneys to reduce their settlement offers? Or are you talking about reevaluating the matrix that says how much are we actually spending versus what our potential losses are?
Well, it's a little bit of both. And I mean, let me make the point abundantly clear. I mean, this is obviously a terrible tragedy that's happened here, and this is not something that we should be taking lightly. Again, I think we got down this rabbit hole early on in this conversation, and obviously there's a lot more to be talking about. Obviously, the city needs to make right this terrible tragedy, and I think that they've been doing a pretty good job so far of working with the folks who've been affected by this to try to reach some sort of closure, and to the extent that it's possible, to create some sort of healing for something that has really been a tremendously tragic situation all around. But specifically to your question, I think step one is don't settle a lawsuit as soon as you get a demand letter. Let the litigation process play out a little bit. It's very rare for litigation to go all the way to trial in civil cases, but it happens sometimes. More often than not, cases will get tested through motions and other procedures that test the validity of a case before it gets to trial. So there are a lot of off-ramps before you actually get all the way to trial by jury and all those other things.
So I get that. And I get, we'll move on to some other subjects, but thematically connected here, the other large piece of litigation that the city's facing that we have untold costs on because the city won't disclose it is our districting lawsuit active districting lawsuit. There's a lawsuit in the works to force the city to move from at-large elections to 7 districts. The city has fought it. It's gone up and down the various courts. I think we're awaiting a new trial date, I think is the nutshell version of where we are now. The plaintiff attorneys have a demand to A, settle and go to districts, and B, pay them out. We have an outside law firm. Again, we don't know the total amount we've paid to them, but it's going to be a lot. I guess untold millions at this point. Do you think we should settle that case, or do you think we should keep fighting that case?
Well, I have a problem with reaching a settlement where we select for the voters a form of representative democracy. I don't like the idea of telling the voters that they have to take one form of government rather than another. For example, if the city were to settle it and say, all right, voters, now you have to proceed with districts. I don't feel comfortable with that. I think that per the charter, per good governance, we should put the question before the voters and let the voters decide. And they have in the past. They voted on the question of districts, and I know that was a long time ago in a very different political climate. But my personal preference, honestly, just as speaking for myself here, is I'd like to see some form of ranked choice voting, maybe some kind of hybrid system.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's possible to create some sort of settlement where we can put the question to the voters and also tie up the fee issue. I honestly just don't know if it's feasible to do that. But to the extent that there's a way to resolve this in a way that puts the power of democracy in the hands of the voters, yeah, I think that's something worth exploring.
And I guess this comes back, though, to the notion of litigation money, right? Like,
yeah.
If the plaintiffs in this case do not want ranked choice voting, and legalese here will get technical very quickly, and so we want to sort of avoid that. But there's the California Voting Rights Act, which is what this lawsuit is brought under. It says if you do certain things and you can show a form of discrimination, it mandates that you change your elections. It doesn't mandate that voters get a choice. It says if you can prove your elections are biased under their clauses, a change has to happen. Districts have been the singular remedy that has existed under that clause up thus far, right? Like no court case has moved to ranked choice voting or something else. It has said you go to districts. And so I guess what I'm interested here is it doesn't sound like you favor districts automatically, like you favor ranked choice voting as an alternative form. But when it comes back to the notion of saving money and litigation costs, like this is a huge ongoing expense that will be ongoing probably for many more years because of the up and down nature of the court system. So I guess my question to you is this court case worth spending the money to fight? Or should this also be viewed in the spectrum of let's save $100 million or whatever the cost is and just settle it out and move to whatever the plaintiff wants?
Yeah, I don't think the cost is going to be $100 million, but I get your point. It is a huge cost to the taxpayers, and it's money that could be used for other priorities, like we're talking about public safety, getting money back in the housing trust fund, things like that. I think about this question often. I think we have to be very careful to take power out of the hands of the people. And again, I don't really feel comfortable supporting a solution where we force the people to have a form of representative government that's not chosen through the democratic process.
But the law does that explicitly. Like if the city loses, there's no public choice in what you get, right? If the city loses the case, you're going to move to districts.
Well, I think the court has some discretion in crafting the remedy.
They do, but I don't mean to cut you off on this. I guess my understanding and knowledge is, I didn't think the court's leeway extended to the notion of mandating an election to choose your government type. I thought the court's jurisdiction was select a remedy and implement it.
Well, it depends what the parties ask for, but I honestly, I'll have to brush up on the specifics of this area of the law, but I think that there is a little bit more leeway than that the court has than just saying, all right, take districts or take nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding of the Supreme Court's decision is that there are other remedies that you could potentially implement that aren't just in the strict confines of a district-based system. Proportional voting, for example, is one thing that I think was mentioned in the Supreme Court's opinion. I'd have to go back and reread that. But to your point, it does largely depend what the parties ask the court for the remedy to be. But you know, I think in the context of a settlement universe, I think that yeah, maybe there is a way to actually get an outcome where the people have the power to vote on the system of government that they want, while also tying up the issue of ongoing litigation. I mean, this is something that's going to go on for years. I
Mm-hmm.
think the judge said we're looking at 4 or 5 more years of litigation, and if you add on appeals and
Mm-hmm.
post trial things, it can take a long time. And I don't think that our leaders should take lightly the expense that's brought on by attorney's fees here. And yet, at the same time, I think that our elected officials have to safeguard the right of the people to choose their own form of government.
I got it. All right. So like I said, we fell in a rabbit hole here, but let's go
Oh, yeah.
back to where we started here, the public safety and staffing. So staffing, the thing people talk about there is generally the police department, right? So like, where do you think we need more police officers, and if so, how many?
Um, I take seriously what the folks in the police department are saying in terms of needing more police officers. I mean, obviously, if we had infinite funds, then yeah, I think we'd look at more staffing for a lot of different departments,
Mm-hmm.
including police, including fire, including a lot of other things. We have to operate under the confines of the budget that we have now. And if we can go ahead and fill the vacant positions that we have right now, and we're still being told that we need more people, yeah, I think we should take a look at that. Where we're going to get the money from, that's a really difficult question. I mean, we gotta very carefully balance our budget. I hate the idea that we're taking away money from things like street paving, from street safety, from other city departments that are underfunded right now. At a time when we aren't keeping our libraries open, we've really got to think very carefully about how we're managing our city's finances.
We do, but I don't think that answers. I guess I didn't hear a clear answer to my question there, which is that we've got 230-ish officers right now, right? Like that's where we're at. There is a notion, I think, out of the police department to get to the vicinity of 250. There are folks who advocate for more like 280. Like there's a spectrum there, and so hiring up to the levels that we're budgeted for is one thing, but I think there's a pretty clear push from both the department and from, I'm not going to say all residents, but some folks to increase beyond that number. Logistical challenges in hiring, and we get to how you pay for it. But I guess I'm curious, do you, as it stands now, think we need to go beyond our budgeted staff, our budgeted threshold, and increase the budget to hire beyond that? Or are you comfortable with the level of staffing that we're budgeted for now? We don't necessarily have it because, to your point, it's perpetually difficult to hire enough officers. But are you comfortable with what we're budgeted for, or do you think we need to increase the budget for a higher maximum number?
Well, comfortable with and what you would do are different things. I mean, I I think we have to make tough choices with the budget, and I think I would have voted for the budget allocation that keeps it as is now,
Mm-hmm.
with the understanding that if we had more money in the budget, then yeah, we should look towards hiring more people. But the reality is what it is, and
But reality, I guess the
yeah,
point of being a council member is to change that, right? The
yeah,
point of being in the position of authority is to say, if I want to go to 240, 250, 280 officers, then I can then implement policies, procedures, changes to either try and increase our budget to pay for it, to secure grants or federal money to pay for it, to, look at retirements and payouts. Like, I guess the point of being a council member is to implement change and alter reality, not to simply say I'm confined by it. I guess that's a rant on my part, but like I guess that's what I'm asking. So when this gets into a priority, right?
yeah,
Because if your priority is hire more police officers, then come hell or high water, you work to secure that, right? And so if your priority is something else, maybe code enforcement, or maybe it's alter policies and procedures to increase the penalties for laws, or whatever it might be, right? Like you're going to have priorities.
yeah.
So that's where I'm going with this level of question, is to figure out, like, is your priority staffing and increasing it, or is your priority something else as it relates to public safety?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, changing reality, I think, is I don't know if I characterize it in that same way.
Sure, maybe a little bit artistic license on my part.
Sure, but I get what you're saying, and I mean, obviously, city council members have to make policy priorities and then figure out how to shape a budget in a way that reflects those policy priorities. For me, I don't think that I would have taken money away from other departments that also desperately need money at this time. If we were in a position where we had those 16 vacant positions filled, and the chief says to us, all right, we've got all positions filled, we need more people on the streets. I think that would be a different reality. In that case, I might have moved money around differently if I were making a budget
Mm-hmm.
decision, but it's not where we are now. But I mean, to your point, I do think that we do have to take seriously the idea that we're paying out a lot of overtime for folks who are working a lot
Mm-hmm.
more than they're supposed to. We've got folks who are getting burnt out. And the other, I think, ancillary question to this, which I've been running through my head too, is if we did have extra money to support the police department or other city departments, obviously I think it makes sense to defer to them. But are we going to spend that money on hiring more people, or are we going to spend that money on retaining the folks that we already have? Departments across the area, like in Torrance, are paying $100,000 bonuses to poach folks in our department.
Mm-hmm.
Folks who are in our department oftentimes can't afford to buy a house to live here. So if we had extra money, again, let's listen to what the folks who are on the ground are actually saying. But maybe it makes sense to give people raises, or maybe it makes sense to find some way to give benefits to folks to make sure that they aren't being, like I said, poached away by other departments around California.
So where we go, are you then, is your priority in public safety? Are you then interested in increasing the available revenue to go down that path via increases to economic development and that kind of thing? Or are you looking at other kinds of public safety initiatives, right? So public safety is a high priority
Yeah.
for you.
Oh, yeah.
If the priority isn't increase the staffing level because we're not yet at our budgeted threshold, and so that's not the discussion that's forefront in your mind, what is the discussion that's forefront? Like, what is it that you are putting forward on the public safety front?
Well, I mean, that's a great, I think, turning point in the conversation towards what we're trying to accomplish here. Obviously, nothing's going to replace boots on the ground and folks who are actually out on the beat, talking to folks on the street, out there with eyes on the ground. But yeah, public safety, I think, is a much broader concept than just staffing levels. We need to embrace 21st century technologies. The police department, I think, has already done a good job bringing in technologies like drone technologies, camera technologies, and obviously we need to do more of that. I think the other dynamic of all this too, which we've been talking about for years. I remember we were talking about this exact same conversation 2 years ago, is figuring out how to appropriately integrate mental health resources into the lineup of our first responders. I don't know if it necessarily makes sense to have police officers, sworn officers who are the ones dealing with mental health crises in the street. Having trained mental health professionals, I think, probably makes more sense for that. And as we're entering into a new reality, legally speaking, of how we deal with folks who are inhabiting our public spaces, I think we should reinvest in resources towards addressing mental health and connecting folks with services that are, I think, better tailored towards mental health challenges that are oftentimes criminalized, but don't necessarily fall within the structure of what we should be having our police officers be working on.
Sure. And again, and not being dismissive of your point, but yes, that's what everyone has said for decades. So like, cool. A, how do you do that? And then B, how do you pay for it? Because if we don't have like, this goes back, like if we're not going to spend the priority on more police officers, but to your point, we have a budget. If the budget's what the budget is, the budget currently isn't being spent on those things. So how are you reconciling that? Are you so A, what are you going to do to implement what you've just said? And then B, how are you going to pay for it?
Well, I think it's worth acknowledging preliminarily that it's really hard to recruit the types of mental health professionals who do this type of work. Across California and across LA, it's really hard to get folks to enter these positions. And oftentimes, when you do, you have to pay a premium on salary and in terms of getting people to work these kinds of jobs. To the extent we can, we need to work with partner agencies across the greater LA area. I think these are issues that are more broad than just something that's confined to within our borders. But working with partner agencies in the county and the state, I think, can help fill some of those gaps. But I mean, to your point, yeah, absolutely. There's a budget shortfall that makes it impossible to fill those jobs given the budget reality that we have now. So, that I think gets back to the revenue side of things, which, maybe we talked about the litigation piece, but supporting businesses is going to be absolutely key. And a little bit of this is I think, a circular conversation
Mm-hmm.
because, at a certain point, the folks in the business community tell me, well, the folks who come to Santa Monica don't feel safe. I mean, obviously, it's a very subjective judgment
Yeah,
which we
yeah,
can get
yeah.
into.
It's broad, but
But there's a circularity to all this too. Um, but supporting business, I think, goes further than just the public safety piece of it. Obviously, there's a regulatory component too, which and I've been talking about for a long time. Cutting red tape, making sure that folks aren't being taxed at levels that are unsustainable, making sure that we're supporting the tourist industry locally are all going to be really key things. I've got a buddy who owns a restaurant on Pico. He's been waiting. I think he said it was 6 months for just to get an electrical permit checked.
mm-hmm.
We had new software that came on board recently with the plan check, but this has been a problem for a long time. And businesses, I think, are suffering because they just can't get through the red tape that's existed for a really long time. And I know the folks at the planning department. I know they're working their butts off to get these permits through, but there's a bottleneck there that's just not working.
Sure. So I'm going to keep coming back to this, which is what. So what are you going to do about it? Right. So that's the problem.
Yeah.
Cool. What are you going to do about it?
Well,
it's like, because again, this is what it comes
yeah.
down to, right? It's like 10 years since I've been here.
Yeah.
Businesses have complained about permitting.
Yeah.
Decades worth of complaints.
Yeah.
I get that. And also to your point around the circular nature, the chicken and the egg of like, if the environment of Santa Monica is less conducive to tourists and they feel unsafe here, then there's less of them that come here, which drags down businesses. So how do you support the businesses with the homelessness? Like, these things are all interconnected.
Oh, yeah.
I absolutely get that.
Yeah.
So give me concrete policy proposal. Like, what are you going to put in place? What are you going to advocate for? What are you going to change? And tell me how it's going to address one of these concerns.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let me talk about the permitting things. We're just on this topic here. I don't think we've had enough time to see how the new software works, so I'm a little bit skeptical that it's actually going to reduce permitting times all that much. There are lessons we can take from the city of LA, where plan check happens really quickly. And a lot of that is just a matter of just going into a counter with what you need checked and getting it done the same day.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of sit and wait or hurry up and wait or whatever that expression is, with the way that permits are processed. So changing processes is going to be crucial. I think giving a city council direction to do that is going to solve one small piece of the problem with permitting red tape. But supporting businesses generally, I mean, I think, look, there are a few key strategies that I think are worth highlighting here. One is re-examining the way in which small businesses are regulated and taxed here.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to look at lowering taxes in small businesses at a time when labor costs and food costs and
what do you mean by taxes? So we've got a proposal on the ballot to lower the business license tax, right, for small businesses and increase it on corporate headquarters, right? So that's one area. But like, where else? Again, city's in a revenue shortfall, right? So like, where else are you going to look at? I shouldn't say shortfall. We're not necessarily in a deficiency. We have a lack of money for lots of things. So what taxes would you look at reducing, or fees would you look at reducing on the small on businesses? And I shouldn't just limit it to small businesses.
Sure.
So I don't know if that's what that's my word, not yours.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think the proposal that's on the ballot right now is going to be key. The other ways in which businesses get taxed locally are sometimes pass-throughs through rent aside, because property tax can be high. Well, in California that's a complicated issue. But figuring out programs to lower rent for small businesses, it's not exactly a tax issue. It's kind of dodging
costs. But I get where you're coming from. Lower costs.
Yeah. But subsidies for small businesses to help pay their rent. What we've seen more so on the residential side is that sometimes a grant of just a few $100s to cover the shortfall in a monthly rent can help the person stay in their home in a way that has been very effective in places like Chicago and New York. The same is true with small businesses. Small businesses can often find themselves at the business end of a lawsuit, for lack of a better term, because they're short by just $1,000 or $2,000. And the mom and pop folks who are running our local small businesses often don't have the bandwidth to be able to cover those crucial costs. So having an emergency fund for local business, I think, will be important. Figuring out how to implement that in a way that supports equity is also going to be important. We also need to get more people in the door in Santa Monica, and making sure that we're driving up foot traffic. We're making this a place that's inviting and welcoming for everyone. I think some of that's going to happen naturally as the city continues to recover from the COVID pandemic. Now that we've got labor peace with our local hotels, I think that's crucial, and I'm really glad that we've finally reached labor peace. It took, I think, far too long for us to get there. But regionally, I think businesses were suffering because of the ongoing strikes in the entertainment industry. I know
Mm-hmm.
folks, in a lot of businesses here in Santa Monica who said that their clientele from the entertainment industry weren't spending money anymore because they were on strike. So now that we're moving towards a year of hopeful labor peace, or better peace than we had before, I think that's going to be a big driver of our local economy as well.
Explain that to me, because I guess I don't want to see like I'm adversarial, but like I don't. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't think our economy was suffering because there were protests outside whatever it was, the five or however many hotels it was, because it wasn't all of our hotels, and those hotels were still operational and there were still people coming into them. So like I don't think that was the reason that our economy is down, and our economy and our sales tax is down more than other places. There are other, I mean, you can go look up the actual numbers, but I can also just go and look up, lying eyes. Like if I drive down to the marina where I used to live, and I look at the shopping center right there at the corner of Lincoln and Fiji, it's absolutely bustlingly full. It's massively busy. REI closed in Santa Monica and moved to the marina. Like retail isn't maybe not thriving universally, but it is doing better in other places than it's doing here. And the hotel strikes were abroad; they weren't just here, right? And so when we talk about increasing, again, my words, not yours here, increasing Santa Monica's allure to customers who are then going to spend money at the businesses that we then get to tax to pay for our streets and police and fire and all those kinds of things, that to me seems like what we should be doing. And so I guess my question there is connect the dots for me between where you see the labor peace situation. I get the strike. I get the strike took away a certain customer base, but the strike was also across all of Los Angeles, right? And if I go into Westwood, they feel a lot busier than we feel. And like if I go to the mall where Italy is, like it's jam packed and bustling, and so those things you cited seem very regional. And so why were they more acute here, or what else are we going to do to bring back that customer base?
Yeah, well, let me start off by saying, and let me be absolutely clear about this: our unions should have had a fair contract on day one. It's unfortunate that the strike had to last as long as it did. But to your point, obviously, this is many dots of a much larger
Mm-hmm.
puzzle that we're talking about here. Labor peace locally is I think one factor that I raised that obviously is compounded with a lot of other factors, and that alone, it's not a determinative factor in the way that there are many other determinative factors that are affecting our local economy. With respect to the entertainment industry part of the strike, I primarily brought that up because the folks who were working in the business just didn't have as much money to spend locally.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of folks here locally who work in the business who have their paycheck evaporate while they were waiting for labor peace. But yeah, there are obviously a lot of other complicating factors in terms of what's affecting retail, what's affecting local business. I mean, the Third Street Promenade. I mean, we could talk about this if you want to get into it, but
Sure.
it's a really unique space, not just
Absolutely.
cinematically, but I think in terms of a retail center
Mm-hmm.
generally. And folks have been pointing the finger in a lot of different directions in terms of what's going on with the promenade. I remember, 4 years ago when I first got on the planning commission, we were talking about Promenade 3.0.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are 4 years later, and as far as I know, those plans are essentially on ice as we continue to work our way through a broader economic recovery.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're talking about the future of the promenade and the future of retail in Santa Monica, obviously, I think we're seeing a little bit of a tipping point in terms of spaces that are going to be refilled with new things. Experiential uses are, I think, something that's proving to be a popular and effective use of space that is proving to be effective. In terms of the vacancies that we're still seeing, I do think that there's a mismatch between the rents that are being offered and what the market demands. My understanding is that there is somebody who came in and bought up a bunch of properties on the promenade, and so those might turn over again soon. But what we can do as city council members to help support local business in Santa Monica, I think is one is be vocal advocates for supporting local business. Get out there on the streets ourselves. Get out there and show that this is a place where folks should come visit. But also figure out how to invite those kinds of uses that make sense and drive foot traffic. I mentioned experiential uses. I think reimagining some of the things that failed, I think, largely due to bad timing, like the food court on the promenade. I think are things that we should take a second look at.
But to your point, so the promenade's private property, right? Yeah. So the city can't mandate squat, but so the city can't mandate squat. Like, it can't make anyone come and go, and so you're looking at, I guess, incentivizing stuff. I get that. You can offer tax breaks. You can offer easier zoning. You can offer priority permits. You can do that kind of stuff. But you can't force people to charge less rent, right? And so when you look at what the city, if you go and ask a business owner, and I mean, every candidate's going to come in and tell me they spoke to a business owner. Like, I speak to business owners all the time too. Like, I know exactly what the business owners are going to say that they need the problem solved at. They are 100%, all of them, going to talk about crime and homelessness and the atmosphere and perception of Santa Monica as a retail destination. Like, that's what they're all going to say for the retail businesses, because business is more than retail. There's corporate headquarters, there's lawyers, there's other kinds of things that largely we've lost for COVID, remote work, right? But like, that's what those retail owners are going to say. They're going to say, a homeless guy was in front of my store the other day and it scared away a customer. They're going to say, I suffer from shoplifting because the people come in and steal a lipstick and run out and they're gone. They're going to say, some guy came and yelled at my customers while they were on our alfresco dining and now they're not going to come back. Like, I just feel like I guess, do you not feel that way? Because I guess that's what it feels like to me, like businesses want to hear from council candidates. They want to hear what they're going to do, what you guys are going to do to alleviate the burden of them that is caused largely by the mentally ill homeless population, not the universal homeless population, but the mentally ill homeless population. And so I guess it's fine to disagree with me. If you think I'm wrong. But like, that's what I feel like they want out of council members.
No, I'm hearing that too. I mean, these are conversations I think that we've both heard, not just from the business community, but from folks who shop on the promenade and folks who shop downtown generally. And it's obviously a conversation that extends beyond just the downtown business community too, but other other parts of our city as well. And to your point about what city council members are going to do, I think reprioritizing investing in mental health resources is going to be important. We talked a little bit earlier about how to do that, and that does involve, I think, partnering with other agencies across the area to get the resources, because I don't think we have the budget locally right now to do that. But I mean, I guess to your point again, you can recreate your own reality with the budget, to use your words. To make it happen.
Or you can also prioritize things. Like, when you say partner with other agencies, cool. So we go to LA County and say, hey, can we have some more money to fight homelessness and mental health? And they say, we don't have any. Sorry, move on. And then we're in the same position we're in now. So like, every single time I've talked to candidates about anything, this idea of let's work with our partners comes up. Pick a topic, it comes up. And then I guess I am at the point where I'm like, that answer doesn't feel satisfying to me, because anyone now, our city manager, our council members, our past council members, they can go and do that and say, hey, can we partner on something? And at the end of the day, you are then handing over agency for the solution to the partnering agency. Because if they say no, you're left like hat in hand being like, well, that didn't work. And so like, how can we, can we force someone to partner? Like, what's a specific partnership you're looking at? How are we going to pay for, like, and again, I'm going to put words in your mouth here, but like with therapeutic transport vans, the county's transport van, if you want to increase those hours, someone has to pay for it, right? Like, it's their van, it's here, it's a partnership. End of the day, someone has to pay for it.
Right.
Yeah. So like, where are we getting the starting point in this chicken and egg from? Like, what are we going to do so that we either have the money or the political clout to either pay for the partnerships or force them to come to fruition?
Well, about the political clout part, I work with folks in county agencies all the time through my work as a public agency attorney, working for stakeholders, the land use space and infrastructure space. So, look, if you're looking for somebody who has those political connections, I'll make it happen. But specifically about the point of this chicken and egg thing that you're talking about, Yeah, it is really difficult, I think, to measure accountability in the space, especially at a time when we are partnering with partner agencies across the area, and folks do get transported, and then folks will often come back to where they were picked up from. So I think, and it's important for us to also dig a little bit deeper here and get to the root issue here. And none of the broader problems underlying housing insecurity, homelessness, mental health issues are really going to be addressed by putting band-aids on these solutions, like the things that frankly we're talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
And we do need to get to the root problem of it, and that's obviously something that is a much bigger issue beyond the borders of Santa Monica, and obviously it's something that is going to take a long time to redress.
So what is that root issue then?
Of homelessness?
Yeah, I mean, you just
Housing insecurity.
Okay, so then if it's housing insecurity, then again, you're on Santa Monica City Council, so housing insecurity is the root of these things. What are you going to do to what, and how are you going to impact that then, right? Like, and again, this is the Santa Monica City Council election, right? And I also go through this a lot where folks come up with stuff, and it's like, this isn't County Board of Supervisors,
Yeah,
Santa Monica City Council, right? So if housing insecurity is the root cause of all this, and it is a huge regional issue, what are people supposed to do? Just supposed to just look at, oh, it's regional, I guess we can't do anything about it, right? Like,
well, no, there is I think some local stuff we can do specifically to that. I think we need to make sure that we're providing adequate and meaningful shelter space locally.
mm-hmm.
Um,
We have shelters.
We have semi-shell. I think we can be doing
well,
better.
we got 2 general shelters plus a couple of specialty ones. And
right.
As of what was it, last week, they're at 80% capacity.
Right. Yeah, I think obviously, I think we can probably leverage the resources we have in a way to make sure that we're getting up to 100% capacity and making sure that folks meaningfully feel safe there. But I think we should look at expanding the number of emergency beds that we have locally, because it's really a factor of either folks sleeping in our parks and sleeping in our streets, or sleeping in a shelter bed somewhere that we put here in Santa Monica. And we can talk about what that looks like and where it makes sense to do that. And I hear folks talk all the time online and in person about how, oh, if you build more shelter space, then everyone from all around the area is going to go flock and use that shelter space. I think that there's a way to meaningfully track the folks who are being prioritized for that shelter space, in a way where we're prioritizing the folks who have become unhoused or have been homeless in Santa Monica for a long time, and prioritize spaces for those people.
Yeah, we already have that system, and it's, I mean, again, my rant, like, it's not particularly effective. So we prioritize people who are made homeless here, people who work here, people who've been here for 5 years, or people that are high users of services. The city refuses to provide the information on which of those 4 people and how many there are. So we have no idea if there's any Santa Monica residents who are in that system, because they don't disclose that information. So we're supposed to have a system right now, today. That system is already supposed to be in place that should be tracking that. Even if you get that, this goes back to, you should have said 2 things there. You said a tangent. There's folks who talk about, if you increase the number of shelters, then you have more people coming in for those shelters. And you then said, well, but you can track meaningfully the kind of people that are going into them. That's true, but I think that doesn't alleviate the initial concern, which is, you build more shelters, you know who's going into those shelters, great. But if you build more shelters, and you create an environment where Santa Monica has a reputation for being somewhere that homeless people think they're going to get more services, think it's going to be more, not easy, because homelessness is never easy, but it's a better place to be homeless than somewhere else. That would then draw more people here. Like, I think there's a concern that Santa Monica makes itself a magnet for homelessness through some of our policies and procedures. I don't think that's a lie. I know there's that concern. South Park put it out, what was it, 10 years ago, come to Santa Monica, the homeless. Eric Cartman jumps a skateboard over 3 homeless people in Palisades Park. The city has a reputation for being somewhere that caters to homelessness. And so I think you might disagree with that, and it's fine. I do or you don't. I'm interested to know if you do or disagree with that. And B, what do we do about that? How do we stem an influx of homeless individuals to our city that has the potential to overwhelm any policies we put in place to move people out of homelessness?
Yeah, so let me take, I think, one related point, and I'll answer that in a second. But we're kind of losing the forest for the trees here. I mean, we're talking about social services and emergency shelter space. Yeah, obviously that's, I think, a strategy that I brought up as an immediate response to folks who have nowhere else to go on the streets right now in our parks. But when I talk about homelessness being a housing issue or a housing, you know, related to housing generally, obviously we need to look beyond just shelter space and social services, but figuring out how to meaningfully figure out, the problems that are causing folks to fall into homelessness in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is obviously something that's broader than just our borders here in Santa Monica. But we can take empirical lessons from places like Chicago and New York. There, they have figured out the best way to address homelessness is to keep people in their homes. I'd referenced it earlier, but there are programs to give folks just $100, $200
Yep.
to cover the
We
rent.
have rental assistance programs in Santa Monica that are actually very effective. We know that our preserving our diversity and pod and those things, we know unequivocally that those keep people in their homes. We
Yeah,
do a good job of that here.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, but let me get straight to answering your question directly. I mean, you asked, do I agree with the premise that
Yeah.
having social services here brings people to Santa Monica
Mm-hmm.
to use those services? I I don't know if I agree with that premise. I think, even if it were true, I'm not so sure it would be such a bad thing. To the extent that we have the opportunity to provide help for folks who need help, ethically, there's a part of me that says, I don't know if that's such a bad thing. I mean, obviously, getting back to the key point we said from the beginning, we have to be careful stewards
Yeah,
of our funds. So
exactly the point.
we can't help everyone in the world. If we had infinite money, then
Sure.
yeah, we could be the mecca for, helping people. But that's not it. And we've got to worry about the folks locally, who are lifelong Santa Monicans, and even folks who just moved here a year ago who are struggling, and figure out how to appropriately allocate those resources. Um, so, I mean, getting back to your point, um, yeah, I know. So there are, I think, empirical issues with measuring how these services are utilized effectively to help out those who have been here a long time in Santa Monica, are Santa Monica residents. But let's figure out how to make it work. Let's figure out how to actually get the measurements that we need to make sure that we're effectively implementing those services. And I, for one, would rather see us figure out how to get emergency shelter services for folks who are sleeping in our parks, rather than have the system that we've had right now, where folks are pitching a tent and have nowhere else to go except in our parks.
Well,
You know,
but they can go to the shelters. Shelters are 80% capacity, so like we still have shelter space.
well, I think if everybody who's sleeping in parks on the street went there, I don't think
They,
that we would have
I
enough
agree. They
capacity.
would fill up if
Yeah,
everyone came in.
yeah,
But like, I guess the point there is that, like, there's a lot of stuff you can talk about shelters and why people choose not to go in them or not, right?
yeah,
And shelters are also critically important because both ethically and legally, making things difficult or mandating actions where you don't have anywhere to put people, like, there's a whole can of worms around it. I get that. Um, but there's other services other than just the shelter part of it, right? There's
right.
other things you can provide, and I think that's something that I guess personally I feel pretty strongly about, because I sat across the street from the city's largest service provider for 10 years, and I watched every single day people walk over there for their services. I watched people do it. And I'm not saying the train brings people here, it's a transport venue, there's plenty of other ones, but I also watched every single day. I watched people walk from the train station to the People Concerned Service Center. And some of those people then walked from the service center and committed crimes at my building. Some of them, not all of them, but it was fairly frequent that we saw drug use, that we saw um, sex, we saw prostitution, we saw all kinds of things on that block amongst a small percentage of the population, homeless population, who were drawn to that block specifically because of the services they were getting, not the shelter. They weren't going into the shelter. We would literally watch someone come away with a change of clothes and then shoot up. Like, people were going there for the services and then doing whatever else they were going to do. So I guess my point here is I have an anecdotal belief. I have a personal experience that tells me when you put services for homeless folks somewhere, that draws people to it, and a small percentage, fully admit it's a small percentage, then behave badly after receiving those services, that bad behavior then taints and damages that block or that area, right? And like, I guess that's where I sort of my thrust on this questioning is like, that's been my experience for 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think another point that you raise is an important one. I mean, you use the word taints the block. I and obviously people have very different personal experiences interacting with folks who are unhoused in our community, and folks who are experiencing mental health crises, etc. Um, I think we need to, figure out how to address both the reality of the fact that we do need to connect folks to social services somehow. I mean, if that social service went away, I don't necessarily think we'd be better off as a city. But
Yeah, I mean, that's the debate, right?
yeah,
Is if you didn't have that services there, would those people be traveling to that block? Like,
yeah.
no, they
But
wouldn't.
yeah, but there might be other area, other ways to figure out how to thread this needle. For example, putting social services, for example, the VA campus outside
Hmm.
of Santa Monica's borders.
Yeah, you could
That
move
might
it
make
somewhere.
sense. Yeah,
Absolutely, you
yeah,
could move. Like as a policy, you or someone else could advocate for moving the people concerned from their downtown location to their Michigan Avenue location, which would remove much of the impacts of their services from the city's largest retail hub. Right, like you don't have to cancel them, but I guess the topics here are broad and like I guess what's kind of what I'm looking for is like these sort of concrete solutions, kind of what I'm interested in getting
yeah,
from you.
yeah,
And I don't mean to cut this one
yeah.
off either, but like
Sure, yeah,
we are approaching some of our time limits on stuff, so I want
sure,
to make
yeah,
sure that like so we've done a little bit of crime, we've done a little bit of homelessness,
yeah.
we've done a little bit of housing. Are there other things that you wanted to talk about? Is there something else that we haven't gotten to yet? If not, we'll continue on this vein for a little bit. But like, if there's something else you did want to address, I want to make sure you get an opportunity to do so.
Well, on this vein, I think it's important to say at some point here that we have to take seriously people's experiences in Santa Monica. And obviously, my experience and your experience is going to be very different than people of other abilities,
Yep.
of other backgrounds. And so, the lens that I see the world is going to be very different than the lens that other people see it through. That being said, I think that there's a lot to be positive about with Santa Monica as well. We've been I think been spending this
Mm-hmm.
time talking about things with a little bit of a negative connotation here, but we have a bright future to look ahead to as well. The Olympics are coming. We've been historically a hub for innovative policies in terms of housing, the environment, the way in which small governments or small city government operates. Um, and I think we gotta look to and appreciate the positive as well. That's not to make light of the fact that folks do, I think, have a lot of concerns about the ways in
Mm-hmm.
which candidates are going to approach these issues. And obviously, there's been, I think, I don't know how to put it, but folks online, folks around town are saying, oh, there's a slate of 4 people who are pro safety, and there's a slate of 4 people who are not.
Mm-hmm.
I would strongly disagree with that notion. Like I said, I think I'm the only candidate who's worked for a law enforcement agency, developed use of force policies. I understand how to work with folks in law enforcement and to appreciate that we need to listen to their needs specifically. Um, Again, it also bears mentioning, Dan was out fighting on the front lines of Iraq. I mean, we all have specific plans and policies in place to address public safety. I think what differentiates, these slates, for lack of a better term, is that sounds to me like we've got 4 one-issue candidates, and 4 people who have a more robust idea of how we're going to implement public policy in our city moving forward. Safety and addressing homelessness are absolutely crucial components of that, and in fact, I think are the foundation of building a secure city and a city that's going to support business and our residents in the next 4 years.
Sure. And again, I don't want to pick at stuff too much because we got time. Time is coming upon
Sure,
us,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
like moving on from some of that, I guess. So was there another though topic area that you wanted to talk about? Like, because if not, we can move. We'll give you a chance to wrap it up and do a closing statement and make sure we're still sort of close to our hour of conversation. But
sure.
was there a subject area that we didn't get to yet that you wanted to talk about?
I'll defer to you. I mean, we could talk about the environment. We could talk about what our city is going to look like preparing for the Olympics, infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, there's things we've only got an hour, and these are all
Yeah.
huge
Oh, yeah.
conversations,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the thing. So, I mean, I guess broadly speaking, we did a little bit on economy, crime, safety, homelessness, environmental stuff. We talked about we haven't done. I guess we haven't really done much on the environmental side of things. Like, is there something that you have as an environmental topic or subject that's close to your heart that you wanted to see the city implement or do?
Well, a lot of things.
We got pollution at the pier is perpetual and chronic
Yeah.
and ongoing.
Yeah.
We've got environmental cleanup at the airport for whatever's going to go there needs to be cleaned up. You've got the recent banning and unbanning of natural gas appliances as the coming of the Berkeley and the court cases. Um, well, we've still got PYP. We've still got the contaminants in some. We actually don't have it. Our water table was contaminated by petroleum, but we've done a pretty good job of cleaning that up. But we've got water self sufficiency.
Oh yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
Pick one.
So I mean, the airport is that's a topic we could talk about at length. I'm looking forward to seeing a great park built there, and the folks who are elected now are going to be the ones really taking the forefront of planning for how we're going to get there.
Yeah, it's an interesting timing for people who are elected now, right?
Yeah,
Because it's like
yeah.
2028 is when we can close it. So it's like, but yeah, I agree planning wise. But are you thinking of just a park, or do you want to see more than a park? Do you want to see housing there, or is it just open space?
I don't think that we should put housing there. I think this is a once in a multi-generational opportunity to build a park with a contiguous piece of land of that size. I mean, I think a park can take a lot of different shapes and forms. There are a lot of, I think, public serving uses that I think would fit within the context of Measure LC that aren't necessarily strictly just a park. I mean, I think you could have, for example, like a amusement center uses,
mm-hmm.
And it might be an interesting counterbalance to the pier if we have some sort of
mm-hmm.
amusement center at the airport.
Yep.
I mean, we're going to have to look at how we're going to get revenue to do this. Obviously, it's
mm-hmm.
going to take a long time to clean up the pollution, but the folks who are elected now are going to be the ones at the forefront of this planning process. I'll be honest, I'm kind of surprised we didn't see any pro aviation candidates.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's pretty universal on this subject at the moment.
Yeah.
But c'est la vie, times change.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess we are approaching our time a little bit. Do you want to give a closing statement, like make your final pitch to folks?
Yeah. So I've said this before, and I'll say it again. You have to ask yourself: do folks feel safer now than they did 4 years ago? Do folks feel that Santa Monica is more affordable than it was 4 years ago? Are we really achieving what we need to achieve through our local government? I think the answer to that question is no. I think it's time now where we need to elect officials and leaders who have the skills and experience to actually effectuate meaningful change in terms of public safety, in terms of building a city that's prepared for 21st century challenges. I'm former chair of the Planning Commission, elected board member of the Sierra Club Los Angeles chapter. I've been fighting for tenants' rights issues for the better part of the last decade, and I've got the skills and experience to lead our city towards the next generation. I know we talked about some specific things here, but I would invite the listeners and the folks at home to reach out to me. I'm the kind of candidate who will sit down and have coffee with you. I'll talk to you, and we'll talk about specifics. And I don't agree with every person on every issue, but I'll talk to people and I'll listen to you and I'll hear your side of the story, and I'll give you the time of day, and we'll figure out how we can find some common ground.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in.
Absolutely.
Taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.